Stanley, distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. Welcome, Ms. Winstanley. So let me start first by asking you, Trump does not think of extending the ceasefire. However, at the same time, he is saying that the war is almost done with Iran. How do we understand these statements?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Well, we've heard from nearly the beginning of the conflict the President of the United States making various pronouncements. Certainly, he has said that we have won the war, we're winning the war, we won the war, it's almost over, it'll be over soon, a couple of weeks. And so the American people and beyond have learned to take his statements with a great deal of skepticism. He has the same pressures that he has had for the last 6+ weeks, which is that support continues to be lacking for this war. The blockade may be the move that moves us toward the beginning of the end, as long as it can hold, be thorough, and it does put an enormous amount of economic pressure on Iran. But the United States is under pressure as well. The administration is. Economically, the markets are very sensitive to what they think is going to happen. That's why the president said it's almost over. At the same time, there are those who are wondering whether ground invasion, takeover of Harg Island, is going to have to be done in order to really bring home to the Iranians that their economy is going to collapse completely. Again, the support at home is very low. Gas prices remain high. The economic outlook is terrible. There was an article today saying that consumer sentiment in the United States is now worse than it was at any point under President Biden's leadership. So the pressure is there.
Mr. Winstanley, so this pressure, mounting pressure on Trump and his administration, and you said, Ms. Gina, so to what extent do you think it can push Trump during the next round of negotiations to actually maybe be more flexible or to offer more compromise when it comes to the conditions that he's setting with Iran?
And therein lies the challenge, which is very difficult, even for a president who is known to be patient and wise, neither of which is President Trump. In order for this war to have been worthwhile, and a majority of Americans do not believe it has been worthwhile so far, he has got to show that he got a deal that could not otherwise have been achieved. The Iranians are intent on denying him that. We've heard we asked for 20 years moratorium. The Iranians offered 5. That's fewer than what was given to President Obama. Vice President Vance speaks about the lack of trust between the two sides. That is absolutely true, but both sides continue to maintain their maximalist aims. And President Trump's hyperbole, braggadocio, tough talk does not leave the necessary space for successful negotiations. He is working against the efforts of the mediators and his own team to go out there because there's very little space for the compromise that negotiations require of both sides. Again, if the pressure is sufficient on the Iranians, they will make the concessions necessary to get to a deal. But there is no certainty of that. And there's a possibility of unintended consequences. We are watching China, we are watching India, other countries that need oil. And the United States is now doing what Iran did, which is shutting down the strait.
Trump is insisting now on having a second round of negotiations, especially in Islamabad. After that, J.D. Vance returned, and basically there were news also that it might be in Geneva, and he is insisting on being in Islamabad, and he's saying that it will not be Turkey. Why do you think that?
Well, in the end, it doesn't really matter where the negotiations are. It depends on what the two sides bring to them. And if there is indeed a commitment, as the vice president is saying, to do their best to get a deal. The deal needs to feel like a win-win for the United States of really keeping the Iranians for a sustained amount of time without pursuing nuclear weapons, and a win for Iran. Now, Vice President Vance said that they would be fully welcomed into the international community, into the international economy, and that is important to Iran. But President Trump also must make clear that our allies in the Gulf are not in greater danger or in a weaker position vis-a-vis Iran as well. And we must keep in mind that Israel, in many ways, maintains a veto over whether this deal gets done.
When it comes to the sea blockade and the U.S. forces blockade on Iranian ports, according to Iran, this will pressure Iran to offer compromises. When it comes to the fact that some ships made it through the strait now to countries supporting Iran, to what extent do you think now there's a gap between the U.S. president's decision and about the execution, basically, in the region?
Well, a blockade was always going to be extremely difficult to maintain. It would take a lot of ships, planes, and personnel to make it 100% effective, and might, in fact, require U.S. forces on the ground on Iranian territory. We understood that there were a number of ways that tankers might try to avoid it, whether it is putting up a false flag of who's running the ship, whose oil is in the ship, blending oil, stopping not only in an Iranian port, but in a port from another Gulf country, and mixing the oil so that it is not clear that it's all Iranian oil, so that they might be able to navigate the blockade and get through. We have to see what China is going to do. They've made a critical comment on it, saying that it's an irresponsible move to further aid in blockading the strait. We have to see. But China has a great deal of oil reserves. We believe they have at least 3 or 4 months of reserves, so they may not feel the pinch as quickly as India, which has far less reserves. So there will be efforts to evade the blockade. That is expected. The United States does believe that it has covered the strait or the opening sufficiently that it will largely be held, certainly enough to do damage to the Iranian economy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gina Winstanley, distinguished fellow